And what we're looking at, this is for a global class, which could be an 8th grade class or a first-year high school class. This is an argument essay. And what you're looking at is the 3 parts of a self-monitoring tool. This is a self-monitoring structure, a self-navigating tool. If you look at the left, what you're looking at are the learning targets, and they really should begin with either an I can, right, or an I will, and you can say will have, right? Sorry, we can type it. Clear and effective organizational structure. Now I know someone's sitting there going, Marie, get rid of those capitals because you're just ruining those sentences and it's driving me crazy. So I'm here for you, right? I felt your pain and I made the adjustments. Okay, Christina, I'm looking at you. This is how this is happening. So the idea here is to have these written as learning targets. And what do I mean by that? I just mean that they're student facing. So I might take skills that you and I would normally have in our units, right, in a curriculum, something I could unpack from, let's say, outcomes or objectives, certainly, standards, and I write them as student facing. I want children to be able to understand what's on a self-navigation tool. If they can't understand what's on the self-navigation tool independently, then they're not going to be as successful. We're going to talk about this, but it's called a learning target. Okay. Notice the rest of it, it's pretty blank. Teacher could fill out this part, or a student could fill out this part when they get stronger at it. But it's not a rubric. I could certainly put criteria in here like a rubric, but it's either they've got it or they're not there yet, right? It's yes or not yet. It's at standard or approaching standard. It's got it or developing. Whichever language you want to put here, the idea is there's only 2 layers. It's not a scoring rubric where it's always, sometimes, you know, rarely, and never. Okay, it's the criteria. I'm going old school here for those of you. This is like the 1970s and 80s rubric research, right? It's clear, either they're there or they're approaching. Now the feedback section is blank, and this is for us to annotate their work or to say to the student, oh, you know what? You just need to practice this a little bit more. Or you know what? You're going to need to spend some time and learn this, right? This is what kind of feedback has to happen here, and I'll show you why. So this is the first part of a self-navigation tool. Crystal clear learning targets and a way to give the children some feedback about how they're doing on those learning targets. I'm going to pause right here. The whole point of this is so that they find out what they're supposed to be learning. It's the answer to what am I supposed to be learning? And then they find out exactly where they are on that learning. Either they've got it, they need to practice it, or they still need to learn it. That's your objective from this section. Now, what kinds of assessments could you match this up with? Because this actually is not an assessment, right? It's just a tool for communicating with the children. So what kinds of assessments could I provide or match something like this with? Well, let's think. Well, it says I can introduce a claim which is clearly communicated and the focus is strongly maintained for the purpose, audience, and task. Well, gosh, I could have given them a quick little do now or exit ticket where they just had to write introductions, write me 3 introductions. And I could have filled out just this one part. I could have had them write an on-demand essay. I could have given them a simulation essay and asked them to revise it. I could have given them a test, a project, a quiz, an exit ticket, a do now, a homework assignment. In other words, I could match this part up to any assessment I'm already giving and providing for the children, which means to do this, I don't need to invent brand new assessments. Everyone hearing what I'm saying? This is something I partner with assessments or activities or even just check-ins I intend to do as a natural part of my instruction. All right, so I'm going to pause here. This is just the first part. Rather than go through all the slides, we're going to go through the slides after this to anchor our learning, but I'm just going to wrestle with just almost inquiry style, right? I'm showing you one. Let's really get to know this. Thoughts on that? Thoughts on what a learning target is, or how we would be using this with our instruction, matching it up with evidence we're getting naturally from our classroom. It's pretty much always like this. It's got the two levels. Keep the feedback because you want to annotate student work. It's not about getting a grade. It's about making sure the children know. And I could fill this all out at once with one essay, or I could fill it out a little bit over time over the unit, whichever way we want to go. Excellent.
So Marie, I have a question connecting to what you just said. For a self-navigation tool, would you typically more use that in relation to a project or a product? Like this is an essay, right? So in a sense, it's kind of like a project, as opposed to, you know, especially in the younger years, there's a lot of skills work, you know, daily skills work, phonics or spelling, or, you know, practicing letters, for example, that all feed into things like this, some sort of a product or a project. So would those things appear only when it's on this? Would they appear only when it's related to kind of a, you know, a performance or a product?
That's a great question. Let me show you a grade 1 sample. Sorry, apparently. Here we go. So here's an example. This is for six-year-olds, 6-year-old, 7-year-old. And what you can see is there's really just only a couple learning targets. You want it to be very approachable. And it's got the yes and not yet and then comments. And these happen to be math, but I could do this with things like production of sounds or the creation of characters or letters or basic grammar. I can put any kind of learning target in these pieces. I do not put all the learning targets from a unit. So let me say that again. I might have, let's say I have 35 learning targets in a unit, a typical 6-week unit, right? I would pick and choose certain ones that I want to put on the self-navigation tool, because I don't want to overwhelm the children and have too many of them there. And not all of them are very good for putting on a self-navigation tool, right? There's different kinds of learning targets. So you do want to make sure that they are learning targets the children can understand or will understand after you've done some instruction. And 2, that it's something that the children can connect to a learning strategy that they can practice. So it's got to be something that they can practice independently. So you don't want it, anything that is completely dependent on you to give them constant feedback or to help them through their practicing. We don't tend to put that on a self-navigation tool, because by definition, it's very difficult for them to self-navigate it, okay? So it really has to be something that you can match up with a learning strategy. Now, to your question, whether that means it's always a part of a project or not, no, I don't think so. I don't think it's always about being a part of a project or not being a part of a project. The criteria for whether I'm going to put it on a self-navigation tool is going to be more about, can I actually come up with learning strategies the child could practice and do independently of me? If the answer to that is yes, I put it there.
Okay. Very clear. Thank you.
All right, so here we go. So this is a good example of one of those pieces. I am going to go back to the example we were playing with. Don't worry, we'll have time to go deeply into all these examples. I have everything from grade 1 to AP Bio, right? So again, no limit on the age, but it does look different. Looks a little bit different in terms of how many learning targets are there.
Sorry, Marie, can I interrupt?
Yes.
With your
Yes,
example, with the maths one, say, how, like it's got the I can statement, the middle one I'm thinking about, I can solve addition word problems. Should, or is it relevant to break that down into what they should be including? You know, say, I mean, we're doing word problems now in maths, and there's four elements to the problem solving thing. Should we help the children with a little check-off list with that, do you think, or just leave it as a simple statement?
That entirely depends on the approachability of your self-navigation tool. So what I mean is, in this case, because it was so young,
Mhm.
The students here, it was more about, we're just going to call it I can solve addition word problems. And they usually had an anchor chart or something that had that little checklist.
Mhm.
And they were doing it in a center. And so they always had that to refer. So they didn't overly process it on the self-navigation tool because it ended up getting too long.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, if this was, let's say, a year 4 or a
Mhm.
year 5, they might actually have a special self-navigation tool section for some of the things they're doing to break down the word problem, because the children are not intimidated by having 10 learning targets at that time. So it's really about approachability and accessibility. So you're designing the self-navigation tool to be both approachable. Maybe that means I combine some things, or maybe it is a little bit of a bigger learning target, but gosh, it feels doable because there's 3 of them, right?
Mhm.
And that's what this age group wanted. And then accessibility, meaning, is there enough information here for the child to succeed? Or do I have to put scaffolds into my classroom so that the children can actually succeed on this? Because the way it's written right here, it's not enough information, right? So to be self-navigating, what are the things I need to provide so that it's accessible?
Mhm.
You want to be able to answer both of those, and it may actually end up with opposite answers for what you choose to do. Meaning, at some grade levels, I'm totally going to break it out.
Mhm.
And at some grade levels, I'm going to leave it overarching, but I'm going to have scaffolds ready.
Okay. Thank you.
That was a great question. We're going to have a great day. This is awesome. All right. So working on this, I'm going to go right back into the argument. We're seeing the structure. Here's what I'm going to show you several of these all in a row. I want you to notice that this structure, meaning learning target to 2 ways of giving feedback, although the words will change, the structure doesn't. Watch this. So let's see, what do we got here? That's just our notes. This is a sample for the argument. I'm going to close this one then. This is a sample. This is a informational. Okay. This is a 4th grade math. Sorry, let me get up to the top. Here it is. There's the learning target. Now this one they aligned to a pre-assessment. So you'll notice they're telling the children what numbers on the pre-assessment aligned to that learning target. That's all that column is. You can also align that to like names of materials or resources if you wanted to help children find. I've even had it said, you know, look for the purple worksheet, right? And so the kids know which one goes to the learning target. And then again, notice meets, approaching, and then this feedback. Let's keep going. Now this is a bird's eye view. This is for later.
Marie, should you differentiate some of that? Or should, you know, it depends, I know it would, perhaps it just depends on the purpose of the unit and what you want to find out. But how much differentiation should you be doing?
The differentiation is going to come in the 3rd part.
Oh, okay.
So let me be super clear on this one. In terms of the actual learning targets on this part, I do not make a unique one for every child. I tend to make this for my unit when I'm not in session. I walk into my group of children. I haven't even met my children. I have my self-navigation tool ready to go. Okay, because it's not an individual education plan.
Yeah.
It is not something that I'm going to sit here and rewrite all the learning targets for every child. Kill me now. Okay, I don't have the time for that. So I build this. Now, that being said, let's be strategic. I might pick some nice, relatively prerequisite type learning targets, right? I might do that. I might put in some pieces here that I really want to make sure are connected. There's a strategy here. We're going to talk about that in a bit. This is the AP Bio one.
Thank
So
you.
this is AP. Notice it's those same learning targets. They're student facing. I can and I will. It's a little different here where they have correct, incorrect, and minor error and major error. This is work that we were doing with Bob Marzano and Tom Gutsky and Rick Wormelli. And we were looking at this idea of the minor error and major error. I will tell you, I am a big fan of the just annotate the student's work and tell them if they need to practice it or if they need to learn it. Children have told us, and in the research we have right now with the kids, they understand this better. So something to think about.